There is a specific kind of quiet that only exists in coastal Maine at 3 in the morning, when the summer is dying and the rain turns heavy and cold off Penobscot Bay. It is a dense, heavy silence that doesn't just fill a room. It presses against your eardrums until you can hear the blood rushing through your own temples. Maya hated that kind of quiet. She had hated it ever since her mother died in a sterile room in Portland, where the only sound was the rhythmic, electronic beep of a monitor counting down the remaining minutes of a life. Since then, Maya kept noise around her like a shield. She kept a small, unlit menthol cigarette tucked behind her left ear, a habit she'd picked up in college, never actually lighting them, just holding the faint smell of mint and tobacco, close enough to cut through the stale air of old rooms. For 3 straight weeks, she had been living in her late grandfather's saltbox house, buried beneath 90 years of another man's clutter. Arthur had been a line foreman for the county power company, a quiet man who kept every electric bill from 1958 onward, neatly tied in twine, stacked in hemlock boxes in the 3rd-floor attic. Across the room, sitting on an overturned crate of mason jars, was Sam. Sam smelled faintly of rosin flux, motor oil, and damp flannel. He was the kind of person who felt more comfortable around circuit boards than human intimacy. When Maya's grandfather died, Sam hadn't known what to say, so he simply loaded his trunk with 2 toolboxes and a vintage Zenith shortwave receiver, drove 300 miles up the coast, and sat in her attic, helping her sort through yellow deeds and tax receipts. He didn't ask her how she was holding up. He just handed her hot coffee in chipped mug, passed her boxes, and let the hum of his radio fill the silence. The attic smelled of old cedar, dry rot, and the sharp ozone tang of the rain coming through the screen window. Downstairs, the house was dead silent, and that was what was bothering Maya most. For as long as she could remember, Arthur's house had a heartbeat. It came from a 7-foot-tall oak pendulum clock standing in the front hallway downstairs. Arthur had bought it second-hand in 1954, and its steady, heavy pulse had anchored Maya's childhood summers. But the clock had a flaw, a worn brass tooth on the center escape wheel that gave the left swing of the pendulum a strange limping drag. Tick, clack, not a rhythm, but a limp. The clock had stopped 3 weeks ago. Precisely at 4 in the afternoon on the Tuesday, Arthur's heart finally gave out in the county hospital. Maya hadn't touched the weight since. Sam leaned over his receiver, the amber glow of the 6 V6 vacuum tubes casting long, flickering shadows against the rafters. His fingers were dark with grease as he slowly adjusted the heavy aluminum tuning knob. "You're going to burn your retinas out staring at that dial," Maya said softly, tossing a stack of 1972 property maps into a cardboard box. "It's not the dial, it's the skip," Sam murmured, his voice low, almost hypnotic in the warm gloom. "The upper atmosphere is cold tonight, Maya. The ionosphere is reflecting low-frequency signals like a mirror. You can bounce a watt of power off the sky right now and pick up a taxi dispatcher in Reykjavik." "I don't care about Reykjavik, Sam. I just want to find the deed to the boathouse so I can sell this place and never look at a hemlock beam again." "It'll turn up," Sam said. He swept the dial past a crackling French-language news broadcast out of Quebec, past a rhythmic burst of maritime Morse code, and into the wide, empty stretches of the shortwave band. Then, at precisely 8.412 megahertz, the static didn't just fade, it smoothed out, flattening into a velvety, quiet hiss. And out of that silence came a sound, tick, clack, tick, clack. Maya froze. Her hand stopped mid-air over a box of old letters. It was a slow, mechanical pulse, spaced exactly 1 second apart. But it wasn't synthetic. It had the dry, woody resonance of ancient oak, and beneath every second stroke, There was that unmistakable limping drag on the left swing. Tick, clack. Underneath the mechanical cadence, barely audible above the noise floor of the receiver, was the wet, steady sound of someone breathing softly into a microphone. Sam chuckled, though the sound was tight and thin. Well, some amateur operator out in the woods is running an open mic next to a grandfather clock. That's a waste of a good frequency. Sam, Maya said. Her voice didn't sound like her own. It was dry, stripped of air. Turn the volume up. Sam hesitated, looking back over his shoulder at her. Maya, it's just a signal. Turn it up, Sam. Sam reached out and clicked the volume pot 2 notches to the right. The ticking filled the small attic, echoing off the sloping roof boards. Tick, clack. That's not just a clock, Maya whispered, stepping toward the desk. The menthol cigarette slipped from behind her ear, dropping silently onto the floorboards. That's Arthur's clock. Listen to the left swing. Listen to the drag on the brass tooth. That's impossible, Sam said, his technical brain instantly firing up defenses, building a fortress out of logic. That clock is downstairs, Maya. It's unweighted. The pendulum hasn't moved in a month. It's a coincidence. There are thousands of Ansonia clocks out there. He soldered that escape wheel himself in 1982 with an iron he kept in the shed. Maya's voice cracked, sharp and desperate in the small room. I sat on the floor and watched him do it. I know what that clock sounds like, Sam. Sam stared at her, the amber light of the radio reflecting in his wide pupils. He swallowed hard, then reached for the heavy Bakelite hand microphone wired into the transmitter rig. His knuckles were white. Fine, Sam said. Watch. He pressed the push-to-talk bar on the side of the mic. The vacuum tubes inside the transmitter hummed higher in pitch as power flooded the finals. Station on 8412, Sam said, his voice forced into a professional, steady tone. This is K8JM in Penobscot County. We are receiving your audio. Please identify your location. Over. He released the bar. The radio went dead quiet. The ticking stopped instantly. The soft breathing on the speaker cut off mid-inhale. For 5 endless seconds, the only sound in the world was the rain beating against the tin roof above their heads. Then, the speaker let out a violent, deafening crack, a sound like a dry oak branch snapping in a blizzard, and static flooded the room. Through the static came a voice. It wasn't a stranger. It was Sam's voice. It was his exact tone, his exact cadence, returning through the small paper speaker cone with absolute clarity. Station on 8412, the radio speaker said, playing Sam's own voice back to him. This is K8JM in Penobscot County. Sam stumbled backward, his stool scraping violently across the wood floor. It's a digital repeater, he stammered, his face draining of color. Someone's bouncing the signal back. But the audio on the radio didn't stop where Sam had finished speaking. The recording kept playing. The speaker broadcast a conversation that had never happened. Maya, don't look behind the cedar panel in the chimney, Sam's voice said out of the radio, flat and devoid of emotion. He didn't leave those deeds for you to find. He left them so you'd stop digging. Then came Maya's voice, pitch perfect, complete with the slight rasp she got when she was tired. He didn't mean to leave us in the dark, Sam, her voice said from the speaker. He just couldn't get it to stop ticking. Maya backed away until her spine hit the heavy brick chimney stack in the center of the attic. Her breath came in short, jagged gasps. Sam, turn it off. Turn it off right now. I'm trying. Before Sam could reach the desk, the rain outside didn't just slow down. It ceased instantly. Not a taper, not a drizzle. The sound of thousands of raindrops hitting the roof vanished in a single fraction of a second, leaving a silence so absolute it felt like being dropped into an airtight vault. The ambient hiss of the radio vanished. From the speaker, the ticking returned. Tick, clack, tick, clack. And then came a sound that made Sam's blood turn to ice water in his veins. Over the speaker, layered right beside the ticking clock, came a loud, distinct, groaning creak of a heavy hemlock floorboard being depressed under a heavy weight. Maya knew that floorboard. It was the top step of the attic stairs, the one right outside the thick oak door. Sam slowly turned his head away from the radio. He looked at the door. "Sam," Maya whimpered, her back pressed hard against the cold bricks of the chimney. Sam reached out with a trembling hand, grabbed the main power toggle on the front of the shortwave receiver, and slammed it down. The amber tubes died. The radio went black. The circuit cut out completely. The attic was plunged into pitch darkness. The radio speaker was dead. And in the total suffocating dark of the room, from the unlit hallway directly on the other side of the oak door, the sound continued in real time. Tick, clack, tick, clack. It wasn't coming from a frequency in the sky. It was standing on the rug outside the door. Maya could hear the wet, heavy sound of air being drawn into lungs, slow, methodical, and patient. Neither of them breathed. Neither of them moved. In the absolute darkness, the brass doorknob on the attic door began to turn, slowly and smoothly, as a dry, cold draft crept underneath the doorframe, carrying the faint, unmistakable smell of menthol and fresh-turned earth. On the desk in the dark, the small cassette recorder Sam had brought to log radio signals gave a soft, mechanical click, its red record light blinking once in the gloom as the tape began to spin, capturing the exact, heavy silence of the room and the slow, wet breathing waiting on the other side of the wood.